Connie at Instruqt. We have a great talk planned for you today on developer experience with our guest Turja Chaudhuri. Turja has more than 10 years of experience working in IT, including more than 5 years in cloud technologies. Currently, he serves as an assistant director for cloud platform, and he has worked with multiple enterprises in their assisting their journey to the cloud and also help them establish best practices for architecture and governance in the cloud. So Turja, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Connie. It's a pleasure.
So actually, your article about why boring is not bad for enterprises always really caught my attention. And maybe let's start by discussing like what prompted your interest in writing about, adoption in enterprises.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I have always been kind of interested in enterprises is basically when you go to the internet, you see a lot of articles, right? But most of them are getting started, and the scale is much less than what you typically expect from an enterprise customer. And things start to break at scale, right? So issues which you will never have in, say, for example, a 2-member, 3-member, 5-member team will start coming up when you have a distributed team which works across a big project or works across multiple products. That is why, because I have always spent my life in enterprises starting from 2012 when I first joined Samsung Research, then I went to PricewaterhouseCoopers, then PwC UK, then Accenture, now I'm with EY. So because I have been with big firms, I have seen actually firsthand how things are very difficult to do unless and until you follow really strong patterns, good design patterns or processes at scale. So things actually break at scale. I have seen that firsthand, and that's why whenever I write, I always kind of try to give that perspective on not how to get started with stuff, but rather how to operate stuff at scale across an enterprise.
Yeah, excellent. And from your experience, right? We all want, innovation, right? In companies to be in the cutting edge, doing a lot of new things that, benefits customers, the organization. But at the same time, right? Stability, reliability is very important. So what is the best way to balance that from your experience, from what you have seen?
Yeah, so see, this is typically a very difficult question. Very frankly, it's not a very simple thing. There is not like a single answer or a very simple answer. Obviously, you have processes in place for stability, right? But at the same time, you will see that some of these processes might actually hamper innovation also. So let's say, for example, you have an innovation team and they want, let's say, OpenAI. Let's take an example, OpenAI. So there will be in enterprises today many people who are working who want to get started with OpenAI. Maybe they have a use case, they just want to get started with OpenAI. But at the same time, as an enterprise, if I think from an enterprise perspective, I don't want duplication. I don't want two teams creating the same chatbot on OpenAI, for example. That's why we have governance. That's why we have processes to avoid duplication, to ensure everything is regulated. So striking that right balance, if you have such a strict process that from idea, so let's take an idea, from an idea to an actual product, it takes say 2 weeks, 3 weeks just to even get that request logged, then the innovation angle will completely get lost. If you create so many hurdles for a team to even innovate or rapidly prototype, then it will not work. But at the same time, when you go to production, there will be some added benefits. That's why when I visualize this, I always think of having a sandbox environment or a non-prod environment, or for example, a hypothesis environment where you can rapidly prototype with much, much less guardrails. You will have some high-level principles there. For example, you will not allow client data. You will not allow PII data on that sandbox. So you will have a few guardrails, but if somebody follows or somebody's solution is constrained within those guardrails, they should be able to deploy very fast, very, very fast. It should be a self-service. You go, next day you get a subscription with whatever you need, you do your prototyping. But the moment you are trying to move to prod, and you are actually allowing to client data extensive use, then you should have processes like say security, infosec, privacy impact assessment, many of that. So that's the balance. So you have innovation culture, you have a lot of innovation, rapid prototyping in the non-prod sandbox environments where people can rapidly prototype without a lot of hurdles, very easy approvals, nothing very fancy. Whereas when you go to prod, you want to kind of prioritize stability a little bit more. You don't want something to be just pushed and break everything when you have, say, 50 live consumers on the platform. That's the kind of balance I would ask an enterprise team to strike.
I see. So after innovation, right? Then you want to roll it out within the whole organizations, right? Like the thousands of developers will be using that. I think that's the next challenge, probably, right? How do you get adoption within the organization?
Yeah, so to be very fair, for example, when you have a new asset and you want to kind of educate people that, okay, we have this offering. Let's say, for example, let's just take a very simple example. Say a company is promoting GitHub as the source code repository. Okay, maybe they were on something else. Maybe they were on Bitbucket or something, I don't know. Now they are promoting GitHub. So obviously, first of all, you need very good transition path, very good adoption path, very good onboarding path. So that those things, so very good documentation, no, not a lot of manual approvals, very good automated flow, telling people the value proposition, everything very well articulated. That is obviously one part. But then what you also need to do, you need champions who will champion you close. So for every portfolio, you need to identify products which are big products, which other small products follow. So if you can get the big products to adopt your offering, then automatically they become a very good success story. But the idea is continuous interaction. So you need to have a dedicated team who is, so adoption obviously will happen organically, but that will happen at a slow, steady pace. When you want rapid adoption, when you want many people to kind of move on to your platform, then you need a dedicated, say, for example, a community focused team who has a Yammer channel or who has a Slack channel where they're publishing details. You want to conduct a lot of road shows that, okay, this is available. And then you want to create a deck, a very good collateral. Say, for example, somebody can ask you, why are you coming up with this new source control repository versus what we had before? So you should have a very good value proposition deck that you can present. So across all of the journey, so you should basically you should have a pre-sales team for that component, basically whose one objective is to help in adoption. Many times what I've seen people fail in is because they think that the product team who is building the product will also help in adoption. Obviously, they will help in adoption to some extent, but their key priority is building a better product. Always their focus will be that this version of product, version 1, the new version 2 needs to be better than version 1. So they will not always have a lot of focus on the actual adoption or the actual evangelizing of. That's why you need a separate kind of a pre-sales kind of a team who is more focused on helping people, educating people, helping them adopt, understand the actual adoption challenges, articulating them, getting back to the product team that, guys, your documentation is not up to date, this link does not work. So basically overall increasing the hygiene of the adoption cycle.
To what extent like documentation play a big role in that?
Huge. To be very fair, you cannot have in a huge company, let's say for example a company like EY with 350,000 people, you cannot manually go and ask people and explain people, right? It's not possible. So you need very, very good documentation. For example, if you go to Microsoft and Amazon document, just look at the quality of the documentation, right? The documentation answers 95% of the questions. Right. That's why you need to have very good documentation. You need to have guided paths. If you see Microsoft Learn, the MS Learn thing that they have step-by-step guides on how to create stuff. Then you need demos, labs. For example, what Instruqt itself is a pioneer in, like having demo environments where you can set stuff up. So basically you need a combination of all of this. You need good documentation. You need a good onboarding path. You need some sandbox where people can get access for free, maybe just try it out for 30 minutes. So all of that kind of combines to give you that experience. So what we say here, for example, is if you see the developer productivity or the developer experience, that is how easy you have made life for your developers, right? So for example, if I take an example, there's Spotify. the company, very well-known company Spotify, how do they measure developer productivity? One of the metrics they take is how long does it take a new developer to merge his 10th PR. That gives a very good idea of how your system is. Is it easy for people to get, for a new developer, for a new engineer to get onboarded to the system? How long does it take for them to actually start contributing real code onto the system? So say for example, if you see that the time to 10th PR is 90 days, effectively your developer is not doing a lot of work for the first 3 months. If you can reduce it to say 15 days, then actually you are doing a great work. By 15 days, your developer has all of the tools, tooling, everything they need to be productive. And documentation, onboarding guides, demo labs, all of this play a pivotal role basically in helping people go to that stage quickly.
Yeah, agree. Let's focus our discussion on enterprise adoption a little bit more on Kubernetes. As we know, Kubernetes adoption is expanding. From working with enterprises, in your opinion, like where most of the Fortune 500 enterprises are in their Kubernetes adoption cycle from what you have seen so far?
See, from what I see is that Kubernetes had in a sense become the de facto compute nowadays. So rather than putting something on a VM, people are creating a Docker image and deploying it on Kubernetes. But at the same time, that does not mean that it is getting any easier. Kubernetes in itself, even with the managed service platforms like say AKS, EKS, OpenShift, it's still very difficult. To be very fair, it's a complicated thing. And that's where your platform teams can help. In a big enterprise, you need a central Kubernetes center of excellence, for example, that creates usable offerings so that developer teams do not have to skill on everything. That is the advantage that you can give to a platform team, as a platform team to your consumer teams, which are the actual business teams. So when I see is that individually teams struggle to adopt Kubernetes. Even though the idea is correct, the process is not very simple. But now many companies, including EY, have platforms, internal platforms, which help in adopting Kubernetes. So you need to go to that stage where every single Kubernetes cluster in your enterprise needs to look the same. As simple as that. Every single needs to be automated. Everything needs to be linked to the same billing cycle. Every single container image needs to be scanned with the same tooling. So there needs to be heterogeneous, kind of like a standard set of practices across the entire Kubernetes lifecycle. That is only when you will increase adoption. The problem with enterprises is standardization. Standardization is what you need. You need it in Kubernetes, you need it in every single other tooling that you offer. And the moment you are offering standardization, it in a sense becomes a little opinionated. But that's okay. You have your own opinion of how you want to do Kubernetes, which is the best opinion from your perspective. Some developer might say, no, I don't want to do Kubernetes that way, but that's okay. That is where you kind of pivot and build an offering that most of your developers, at least 80% of your developers, can use.
Okay, I see. And yeah, so I read about, you mentioning about the Kubernetes Center of Excellence. Maybe can you elaborate a little bit more how that Center of Excellence can look like?
So, see, it's like, for example, when I was in Accenture, I was part of the Cloud Center of Excellence, right? So there can be different things. It's a very standard topic in enterprises. Most of the enterprises have this kind of Center of Excellence. These are subject matter experts, okay, who create document patterns, best practices, standards and guides so that everybody can follow them in a standard coherent way. Along with that, for example, you can even have platform offerings. So you have a standard automated way of deploying, say, a Kubernetes cluster. So all of that kind of falls. So basically it's like your product, your actual core offerings, along with the services, which is wrappers around your offerings like best practices, guides, how to do monitoring, how to do telemetry, how to do observability. So every single cluster should do observability in the same way. Every single cluster should, for example, you can have a guiding principle that one application can only have one Kubernetes cluster for non-prod and prod, meaning you cannot have one Kubernetes cluster having both prod and non-prod in the same cluster. So that can be a guiding principle from your center of excellence. Then you have implementation patterns, you have automation scripts, you might have a Terraform script to do some stuff. So basically that is the high level idea. You have the product offerings and the services, and both of them combine to kind of create a center of excellence.
Okay, I see. That's great. And what's your view that to improve the adoption of Kubernetes, that better internal training also help in terms of like mirroring like real world applications?
True, completely. See, again, as I said, you first have to tackle the big players in your enterprise. So if they are able to adopt Kubernetes, then the small ones will kind of follow suit. That is one approach. But at the same time, obviously you need good training. You need good training on the actual Kubernetes. You need good training on the Kubernetes platform offering that you might have developed. So say, for example, if the enterprise has a platform offering on top of the native Kubernetes services, then you need to train your developers and engineers on that offering as well. That is equally important. And that is where you can have free labs, companies like say Instruqt, and then you can even set up your own lab environment where you can help people kind of play around with that lab, easily onboard. Then you need good documentation, guided path, all of that, basically everything that we have been speaking about, all of that kind of combines into that full-fledged adoption kind of us. So to be very fair, I mean, always when I think about training, there are two types of training. One is the training on the actual asset or the technology. So in this case, it's Kubernetes, for example. I need to know what is a deployment, what is a pod, how to do horizontal pod, auto-scaling, all of that. Then I need also training on what are the standard ways my enterprise wants me to adopt Kubernetes, which might be a little bit different from the generic way. It's an abstraction on top of the generic way. For example, we might want that, okay, all of the Kubernetes clusters, I should have different type of node pools for front end. So my front end services should be deployed on one node pool. My backend services should be deployed on another node pool. Something along those lines I might have. So basically that is a abstraction on top of the generic Kubernetes. So that training is also important, because then everybody knows, okay, my enterprise wants me to deploy and use Kubernetes in this way. So both of this training is important, and your free labs and your guide documents and your learning guides and your training paths kind of help in that overall journey.
Okay, cool. Well, my last question is on platform engineering. Is it just another trendy term, or in your opinion, is it going to have a real impact on the software engineering world?
So I am personally part of the platform team. So I believe extremely strongly in platforms. And if you see, even there are Martin Fowler, who is very well known, very respected in the industry, wrote a lot of books. He also has a good documentation, good guides on platform. If you have read the book called Team Topologies, which is a very well-known bestseller book, they have actually referenced the platform team as an enabler team. So platform is here to stay, from what I feel. Okay, I don't think it's something that is just kind of a fad or anything. It's something that I think actually gives value. So your platform team's idea should be to reduce the overall cognitive load on your developers. Because see, to be very fair, we are saying shift left, shift left, shift left. But the moment we are doing shift left, we are actually putting more and more pressure on our developers and engineers. Earlier, a developer will just know Java and it's okay. Now a developer needs to know Java. They need to know PostgreSQL. They need to know how to do GraphQL. They need to know how to write Terraform. They need to know how to debug a Kubernetes cluster. So much pressure is right now on a normal developer, that the actual essence, which is the only code, the code and the design, that is not getting that much importance. The platform team is a way of offloading some of that cognitive load to the platform team, so that your developer can actually focus on what he wants to do. So when a developer wants to create a web application, say a shopping cart application, he should not have to think about, for example, how do I create my Kubernetes cluster? How do I deploy my services? He should have a very nice kind of a flow that, okay, he has a repository, he's pushing code on the repository, the code gets pushed into an artifactory kind of a stuff where the artifact will be stored and then deployed by another CI/CD pipeline. So those add-ons that you give, that is again the developer experience, right? And the platform is giving you, by helping you, the tools, the offerings, the assets on which you build your application. The platform is effectively enabling you to reduce your cognitive load and just focus on what matters to you, which is the code, which is the business value that you get out of the code. Everything else which is different. See, to be very fair, cloud also came with the same promise. Cloud came with the promise that you don't have to focus. But when we actually started using cloud, we thought that even though cloud is much better than on-prem, you offload a lot of things to the cloud provider, still you have enough stuff you have to worry about. Okay, where do I deploy my code? How do I set up my infrastructure? How do I do monitoring? How do I do authentication? How do I do user logging? Now the platform is an abstraction on top of the service provider, the cloud provider, and it's kind of taking care of all of these cross-cutting concerns, so that as a developer and as an engineer, you can rely on the platform team to do all of these common functionalities, and you can just focus on your code. So again, I personally believe platforms are here to stay. Platform is the future, and many companies, many big enterprises are investing a lot of money in platforms. For example, I don't know if you were aware of that initiative called Platform Con. It's growing tremendously every year. I mean, I think last time they had a huge participation. This year it might be even more. So many people are interested in platforms, and I think they are here to stay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. I think if you want developer productivity, first, developer happiness, right? Make it easy for them. That's really important.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights today. We really appreciate that. Thank you, Turja.
Thank you so much, guys. It's a pleasure.